Welcome to our Trump Briefing Show, folks. Today, we're diving into the latest on Ukraine. European leaders from France, the UK, Germany, and Poland, backed by President Trump, are calling for a 30-day ceasefire with Russia, demanding unconditional peace and threatening tougher sanctions if Moscow doesn't comply. The goal? To stop the fighting across land, sea, and air, and to create space for peace talks. But, as of now, Russia hasn't responded, and the conflict continues with casualties mounting. Next up, a story of hope and uncertainty. Ukrainian refugees, including Sasha's family, who moved to South Carolina under the U.S. Uniting for Ukraine program, are feeling anxious. Recent changes in U.S. immigration policies have paused their parole extensions, leaving families worried about being forced to leave and disrupting their new lives. Communities are rallying behind them, emphasizing their contributions and the need for continued support amidst the ongoing conflict. And finally, in a different corner of the world, an inspiring grant in El Paso supports migrant aid efforts, helping legal groups provide essential services despite federal funding cuts. Meanwhile, in Newark, the mayor's arrest during a protest at an immigration detention center has sparked debate over oversight and detention policies. Plus, tensions between India and Pakistan simmer down temporarily with a ceasefire brokered by the U.S., but fears of future militant attacks still loom large. Please continue to watch for all the details. The Toronto Star reports that European leaders from France, the UK, Germany, and Poland, supported by President Trump, have united in urging Russia to accept an unconditional 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, starting Monday. They warned that failure to comply would result in intensified sanctions, particularly targeting Russia's energy and banking sectors, aiming to make continued conflict too costly for Moscow. Ukrainian President Zelensky called the meeting a very important signal, emphasizing the need for a comprehensive ceasefire that halts attacks across land, sea, and air, and underscoring the importance of security guarantees for Ukraine, including increased military aid and potential deployment of foreign troops. Despite Russia's ongoing violations of its own ceasefire and continued attacks, Western leaders remain committed to pressuring Moscow, with Macron highlighting the role of European and American cooperation in monitoring and enforcing the truce. The Independent highlights that UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, alongside European counterparts, has issued a stark warning to Vladimir Putin, asserting that if Russia refuses the ceasefire, it will face massive sanctions and increased military support for Ukraine. Starmer's visit to Kiev, alongside leaders from Germany, France, and Poland, signifies a historic show of unity, with all parties demanding Russia cease obstructing peace efforts. The leaders expressed confidence that a 30-day ceasefire could pave the way for negotiations on a lasting peace, with the terms to be discussed during the pause. Trump's recent skepticism about Russia's willingness to end the war and his threat of further sanctions underscore the complex geopolitical landscape. Meanwhile, Russian attacks persist, with civilian casualties reported in Sumy and Kherson, and warnings from U.S. officials of potential future airstrikes, complicating efforts to establish a durable ceasefire. CBC emphasizes that Ukraine and its allies are prepared to implement a full, unconditional ceasefire for at least 30 days, starting on Monday, amidst ongoing Russian violations of a previous truce. Leaders from 4 European nations arrived in Kiev to support Ukraine's call for peace, lighting candles at a memorial for fallen soldiers and civilians. Despite the international push, Russia continues its military assaults along a vast front, including deadly strikes on residential areas, with Ukraine accusing Moscow of violating its own ceasefire multiple times. Ukrainian officials and allies stress the importance of ending the war through diplomatic means, with discussions underway on security guarantees, military support, and potential deployment of foreign troops to deter future aggression. President Zelensky's team remains committed to a just peace, even as the conflict persists and the threat of further Russian strikes looms, highlighting the fragile state of diplomacy in this protracted war. CNN reports the heartfelt stories of Ukrainian refugees like Sasha and his family, who fled Kiev amidst Russian attacks and found a new beginning in Hartsville, South Carolina. Their optimism was rooted in the American ideals of democracy and opportunity, but recent political shifts threaten their stability. The Trump administration's suspension of parole extensions and protective statuses has left approximately 280,000 Ukrainians in limbo, with communities like DeWitt, Iowa, and Hartsville feeling the devastating impact firsthand. Local residents had invested emotionally and financially in these newcomers, creating a sense of hope and mutual support, only to face the uncertainty of potential deportations that could tear apart families and dismantle the social fabric they had built together. Yahoo US highlights the critical support provided by organizations like Estrella del Paso in El Paso, which received a $25,000 grant amid federal funding cuts under the Trump administration. With federal contracts slashed and refugee programs diminished, local advocacy groups have stepped in to fill the void, offering legal aid, know your rights workshops, and advocacy for vulnerable migrants. Melissa M. Lopez emphasizes that this grant is a lifeline for the community, which has already faced the loss of federal support, up to $200 million cut from legal assistance programs, leaving many migrants without necessary legal representation. The community's resilience shines through their collective effort to uphold human dignity and due process despite mounting obstacles created by federal policy shifts. The Toronto Star details the dramatic confrontation at the Delaney Hall Detention Center in Newark, where Mayor Ras Baraka was arrested during a protest against the facility's opening. Baraka, along with members of Congress, attempted to inspect the detention center, which is operated by Geo Group under a long-term ICE contract. Tensions escalated when federal officials accused the protesters of storming the facility, leading to Baraka's arrest amid accusations of trespassing and disregarding warnings. Witnesses describe a chaotic scene with yelling, pushing, and the detention of protesters, including the mayor, who insisted he was exercising his oversight rights. The incident underscores ongoing conflicts over immigration enforcement and detention practices, with local leaders and activists challenging federal policies that expand detention capacities while questioning transparency and legality. According to South China Morning Post, the recent ceasefire between India and Pakistan marks a cautious step toward de-escalation after weeks of intense border clashes fueled by mutual accusations over militant attacks and the ongoing Kashmir conflict. The deal, brokered with international diplomacy and the influence of global powers like the US, brought a temporary halt to hostilities, yet underlying tensions remain high. Analysts warn that the fragile peace could be shattered if militant strikes or acts of terrorism occur again, especially given India's recent military strikes on targets in Pakistan and the heightened rhetoric surrounding Kashmir, which has been a flashpoint for decades. The region's history of wars and insurgencies, combined with economic and political pressures, suggests that while the ceasefire might hold in the short term, the risk of renewed conflict persists, especially as both sides are wary of each other's military intentions and regional ambitions. Al Jazeera reports Iran's diplomatic maneuvers as part of a broader effort to re-engage with global powers amid ongoing tensions over its nuclear program. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi's visits to Saudi Arabia and Qatar are strategic consultations ahead of the upcoming indirect nuclear talks with the US and Oman, aimed at reviving the 2015 JCPOA agreement. Iran's nuclear ambitions, long a source of international concern, remain central to these negotiations, with Western nations demanding verification measures and Tehran insisting its program is peaceful. The talks are complicated by the US's previous withdrawal from the deal under Trump, leading to increased sanctions and regional uncertainty. Iran's diplomatic outreach reflects its desire to balance regional relations and nuclear diplomacy, with recent visits underscoring the importance of dialogue and mutual interests in avoiding further escalation or military conflict in the volatile Middle East. Nikkei Asia highlights the recent breakthrough in India-Pakistan relations, with US-brokered talks culminating in a mutual agreement for an immediate ceasefire after days of cross-border violence. The escalation was sparked by a deadly attack on tourists in Kashmir, which India blamed on Pakistan, prompting retaliatory strikes and exchanges of fire across the border. The international community, including US officials and regional leaders, praised the decision to halt hostilities and called for broader negotiations. Indian and Pakistani military officials coordinated efforts to cease all firing and military actions, signaling a potential thaw in decades-long hostility. However, sources indicate that the ceasefire might be a temporary measure, and the underlying issues, Kashmir's status, militant activity, and regional security, remain unresolved. The diplomatic breakthrough was seen as a testament to the influence of international diplomacy, yet experts warn that lasting peace will require addressing core disputes and regional stability concerns. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.